Always a pleasure to be talking to the preeminent Indian tennis voice, Vijay Amritraj. Vijay, thanks a lot, as always, for making time for me and for CNN News 18. I wish we were speaking in better circumstances. As you know, Rafa Nadal has suffered a first-round exit at Roland Garros, a tournament he's won 14 times and a tournament he's synonymous with. First of all, what did you make of his performance? Was he not up to the mark, according to you?
Well, my thought process was when he said he was going to play Paris, that one, he was well enough. Thankfully, he looked well enough when I saw him play his match against Zverev. I thought he looked fantastic. He still looked like the old Rafa. Some parts of his game was like the old Rafa. But the interesting piece here for me was that Roland Garros didn't seed him.
Yeah.
To me, there is no caveat, apparently, to seed him by the rule book. But there certainly isn't a rule book also for 3 guys to win 66 slams.
Yeah.
So I think that, like Wimbledon has a seeding committee and they use 1 or 2 grass court measures to move seedings around, if you remember, during your sport days. But I think when you look at Rafa, you have to believe that he was definitely one of the best 32 clay court players to play in Paris. So if that's the case, then he could have been seeded 32, which means that he wouldn't have played a seed till the 3rd round. So that, to me, that was the first thing that popped out. But I talked to a lot of people, including my son, who works for, does Tennis Channel from Paris at the moment, and he's sitting over there, and he said to me that there is no caveat to allow that to happen, so they had to stick to the rankings. Having said that, the match that he played against Zverev actually was quite impressive from where I was sitting and watching Rafa play. He played the hottest guy in tennis today, unfortunately. He did 4, but he won Rome. He came in there preparing to win Paris, and I think he has to be easily one of the front runners to win Paris, and a little unlucky for Rafa also not winning the 2nd set.
Yeah. Well, certainly that thought popped in my mind too. If you're a 14-time champion at a tournament, do you deserve a seed? And, like sometimes they give you a wild card, but do you deserve a seed as well? But as you explained, maybe they just couldn't manage it according to the rules, even if they wanted to do it. Now, the big question on everyone's mind, Vijay, is if this is the last of Rafa that we've seen at Roland Garros. He hasn't quite ruled out coming back. He has expressed a desire to go on even for a couple of years, he says. What do you think? Is this the last of Rafa at Roland Garros?
Well, for me, the only person who can decide that is himself. But listening to him speak post-match, lost to Zverev, and I thought Sasha did a fantastic job in giving Rafa the stage, even though he beat him in straight sets, and the way he spoke to the interviewer was perfect. It was really well orchestrated for Rafa to say what he did. I think it's too early for him to make a snap decision and say, if I lose this match, I'm going to not play anymore. And, it has to come from the heart for him to say, you know what, I've squeezed every ounce that's possible out of my desire, because along with the desire comes the work ethic to be able to do what he's been doing, and nobody has worked harder than a Rafa. And when you see him playing, that determination that he brings to a match, irrespective of first round or final, it reminds me in my day of a Jimmy Connors who did the same kind of thing. So I think he's got to make the call himself, and he will. I just, for all of us as tennis fans and Rafa fans and Federer fans, at some point in time, we all have to let go as well. And we did that with Beckham. We did it with Usain Bolt. We did it with all of the various Schumachers. We did it with all the people that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 decades, as far as I'm concerned. And you fall in love with these guys from the outside, and you don't realize for an athlete, it can literally end on the drop of a buck, a drop of a coin, And so I feel for him. We've all been there in different stages of our career, and Rafa has been spectacular for the game. Should he decide to quit?
Interestingly, in the press conference later, he said that, he's still enjoying his practicing. He's still enjoying his game. This is what he really loves to do. So it seems like the motivation is still there. But, from your experience, where do you think Rafa is mentally at 38? It's not so much the age alone, but the fact that his game is so physical. Just how long can he continue? Where would he draw the inspiration and the motivation to continue from, given that he's virtually achieved everything? And if he was to continue, what do you think would motivate him to do so? Why would he continue to play?
I always wondered that with these three guys, because Djokovic, Federer, Nadal, you look at them and they've won everything in the kitchen sink, and not just once or twice. So it's hard to fathom as to what else are you looking for. Basically, you're chasing your own history every time you step on the court. Having said that, you look at someone like Rafa, and he's a very physical player as opposed to a Federer. Now, when you're that physical, and I see in his match against Zverev, he started to shorten the points. Now, whether you do it subconsciously or not, you're doing something that you wouldn't have done 5 years ago. So I think as much as your desire wants you to do it, and you want to be able to put in that work, I'm not quite sure that the work can match the desire that he has. And often that happens, your mind is willing, but your body is weak. That's very simply said, but especially the way he played. Federer, on the other hand, had a little bit more grace and elegance to the way he played, but his work ethic might not have been as vicious as Rafa is for his own body, and Djokovic is in between. So I think when you look at the three of them, you really have to go along with what exactly one feels at that moment. But the way we would always like to remember Rafa is by doing those television matches between Rafa and Roger at Wimbledon, Rafa and Djokovic in Australian Open, and vice versa. So those matches are literally etched in my memory, and that is exactly the way I will always remember Rafa.
So do you have a favorite moment of Rafa that is flashing over your eyes as we talk about possibly his last match at Roland Garros? Do you have a favorite moment for us?
Well, that late night match at Wimbledon where they didn't have the roof, they didn't have the lights, and they were closing, literally going to close the match if it had not finished on the last couple of games. And as it got darker and darker, and I could barely see the ball from the television booth when we were calling the match, and to see these two guys just go hammer and tongs at it at Wimbledon was, arguably one of the best ones I'd ever seen during my TV time. And I think what made also the difference was the fact that both of them were extreme opposites in the way they played the game. The fact that they were friends made it even more energetic for a viewer, but the way they played, one physical and the one graceful, and they both were great champions, and you can't choose between either one of them. So when you look at 22 and 20 between the two of them, it's unfathomable.
Yeah. Well, we're possibly looking at the end of Rafa's career too, after Roger Federer. And I don't even know what the world will be like when both of them have stopped playing. But when we get to that, we don't quite know if this is his retirement. He was non-committal about Olympics. He was non-committal about Wimbledon coming up. Maybe he'll play a few more tournaments in the year. And certainly he's eyeing playing Olympics in Paris
Yes.
And that would be a great moment for him. Do you think Rafa is somewhere looking for that one high, or as an athlete, you tend to want to leave on a high, on a good note with some sort of a title or a medal around you? Do you think it's that?
I think my suggestion would always be, I want you to leave healthy. That's the first thing. You want to be able to go back home, pick up your baby, and run with him or her wherever and whenever you want. And I think that's an important factor as you get past it, because there is a lull after you quit the game, irrespective of what you do. There is no high than doing what he has been doing. A greater high than that. And the fact that he reached that pinnacle so many times is unimaginable. And that's something that not that he will that always be etched in his memory, but that's something that he can't replicate doing something else. It would be practically impossible. So I do believe that for him to win the Olympics, if he can win the Olympics and call it call it quits. It would be nothing short of spectacular. But again, that's a long shot. Though, to come back, if he's ready, his body is willing, mentally he's always going to be tough, no question about it. His body has to be willing. But let's not forget that the Olympics is 3 sets. It's not 5 sets. And it's not 7 matches. So I think it's less than 7 matches. I think it's 6 matches or 5 matches. So he gets that advantage as well to be able to play 3-set matches. And it's on his favorite surface in Paris. So all of those things are in his favor, which is why I think he's focused on the Olympics. And if he comes in fit, I will still put him at the top of the favorites list.
Yes. So, Vijay, I am, of course, going to leave a full tribute to Rafa for a day when he actually announces his retirement. I'm certainly hoping he can continue for a little while. But if we have seen the last of him at Roland Garros, and I don't know how long he'll continue to play, I just want a thought about how you think Rafael Nadal is going to be remembered as a tennis player.
Well, I think the way I always referred to him when I was doing television and commentating on his matches, when you watch Rafa play, I think I'm the only one who called him a one-man Spanish Armada. And he was a very much that, because wherever you hit the ball, he was there, and he was able to deliver a spectacular shot from that corner of the court, and especially on his favorite surface of clay. So when you have so many records that you've created and a statue along with the Musketeers at Paris, and there was a beautiful, I think, a picture that came out, or it was on Twitter the other day, about with his wife and child with his statue. And I think when you look at these things, it's hard not to think what he meant to the game. And it'll continue to remain that way, etched in our memory, as we've been fortunate to have seen him play. Now, I look back at that, and when we look at the Chennai Open, and we were one of the first ones to give him a wild card when he came to Chennai, when he was 16 years of age, and won the doubles that year. And at that point in time, I'd already said that this guy's future is going to be unlimited, because you could see that in him. And I think when we look back at these things and we look at the career that Rafa has had and how he's touched fans and sports fans across the world, I think it's nothing short of unique, special, and spectacular.
Is he the GOAT? Who is the GOAT for Vijay Amritraj?
Well, again, you're talking about these 3 guys. I always put them all in the same category, 24, 22, and 20. If you go with the numbers, obviously you're staying with Djokovic as he moved on. And I think he has the capability of winning 1 or 2 more, depending on how fit he remains. But the Federer fan will remain in the Federer corner. The Nadal fan will remain in the Nadal corner. And obviously Djokovic fans will remain there. But the point is, if you look at the reality of it, those of us who are fortunate enough to have played the game at a very high level, I consider all of us very, very good players, and we won our share of matches and tournaments. But when you look at these 3 guys and you say 66 Grand Slam majors between the 3 of them, it's hard to fathom when you even talk those numbers. And I say it with a lot of reverence more than anything else, because we know what it is to play at a Grand Slam. And when you look at these 3 guys and what they've done with the game and made it so interesting over the last 2 decades, it's because of that rivalry between these 3 guys that made it so for all of us to enjoy. And then we had the Murrays and the Wawrinkas in between, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it was these 3 guys. So if you look at the 3 GOATs, if you want to call them that, it'll probably be exactly like a traffic light. You need all 3 of them for traffic to go well.
Well, that's the best way one could put it. I do want to say at the end that my favorite memory too is that 2008 Wimbledon final. And, we were supposed to speak after that match, but it was so late that we had to postpone it for the next day. But it was great for me, even as a young tennis lover, to be there and, experience what that finale of a lifetime was like. And we used to hear you, of course, call matches at Wimbledon. It was glorious and truly, really the epitome of sport, and particularly tennis, as far as that match is concerned. So we hold on to those memories, isn't it, Vijay, as we possibly look at the end of Rafa's career.
Absolutely. And the one thing I should say to you is that, yes, fantastic with your political show and keep that going. You're terrific at it. But don't leave us out in sport, because that is your first love, and it should remain that way.
Well, that is why I'm talking to you, certainly. And I'm always very grateful that you make time for me. Thank you so much, Vijay.
Thank you, Shivani. All the best.